Okay guys, so now we're gonna have a look at removing a message. So let's get into it. So basically all that's happened is that now I click here and I click edit message and I can actually start removing messages from my little, well, that's about as exciting as it's gonna get, I'm afraid. But let's have a look. So let's have a look at the application. So as you can probably suspect, there is now a delete message socket connection because, hey, when we actually delete a message, it should cascade to the other person. Like you delete something for you, but it should also be deleted for the people who are actually looking at it. And basically that's all it's going to do. It's just going to get the channel ID from the message and it's going to send the message ID through. And then we have a new delete message method on the message service, and all it's going to do is it's going to find one instance of a message that matches the user ID and the message ID. It's going to delete it, and then it's just going to return a message view that represents the deleted message. And then we have added a new incoming delete message function, or like action basically. And what's going to happen is that when the delete message ID comes in here, we're simply going to dispatch this incoming delete message action with that ID. And let's actually let's walk through let's look at the reducer first. So we have two ways of deleting a message. You can do it yourself, like we have a delete message when you are on your own client deleting something, and when somebody is deleting something from another client, and that's why we need to handle both of these cases. So incoming deleted message is just going to filter through and delete the appropriate message, and the same thing goes for delete message. There's a slight difference here because when you delete something on your own machine, we actually maybe we could probably refactor this, but this is the way I did it for now, where when you delete it on your own client, where you're simply going to value is just going to be the message itself, but when an incoming delete comes in, its value is going to be the message ID of the message that was deleted, because we are not actually sending the message from the server, we're simply sending the ID. We could probably make this a slightly nicer, but for now I think this is good enough. So the chat API, we have a delete method now for delete message. All it's going to do is, as you can see, it's just going to call this endpoint with, well, nothing, with just the appropriate ID. And on the server, we have a message route that is just going to handle the incoming delete, going to extract these. We're going to grab the ID and the user ID of the session, and then we're simply going to delete this message and return a view. Easy peasy. So now let's go and get into the nitty-gritty stuff. So chat has two new events to handle, as you can see, and delete message and, well, the API call and the action. And now you will notice that something that I've done now is that I've removed the concept of looking at the current ID of the current message that I'm on by using an index. Now the reason why I've done that and I've started passing in the message ID is because when we now can update, like updating an existing list is fine, but when we remove a message, we can no longer trust that the index is going to be a reliable source, a reliable reference to the current item that we are on. Because if I'm sitting here and I'm typing in something, this is going to be in the array. This is now going to be 0, 1. But if I remove this, now this is inside of the array 0. This is index 0 now for my list of messages. However, that hasn't been communicated to my chat component. My chat component is going to have, as we saw in the previous video, this.state.key is going to be equal to the old index. That has to be updated, and that's just a hassle. So instead of using an index, which is, even React Word, that's kind of discouraged when you keep track of the keys in a list, we're simply going to use the message ID, because all we need is really a unique reference to the list element, and then we can simply search for this message in our messages array. So that's why we've changed this and now add a message ID to all of the components that we have here, because we need to keep that reference. Right. So you can see here basically there's nothing much exciting going on here. We're simply changed all the references from this.state.key to message ID, and then instead of having it on the state, we simply pass it in as a method input. And same thing goes for here, edit message, nothing super fancy here. Here is the function that actually changed that for deleting a message. So as we see here, we get the event and we get the ID of the message we want to delete. We make the network call. We simply wrap it in our client model and then we dispatch it. As I said before, we could probably just, like, maybe I should do this. Well, doesn't matter for now, but we could probably just send this as an ID so we don't have to have two cases in the reducer, but not super important. Anywho, after that we emit delete message with the message that we have deleted, and then that's going to be it. The server, as we saw earlier, is going to take care of it. And I'll just, for completeness sake, walk through all of this logic here. As you see, there's nothing really going on here. We're simply just passing the message ID reference into the components that need it, and we're going to see that in the other components. And so basically switching out all the references we have to this instead. Here's a slight change though. As you can see here now, when there's an incoming delete message, we're simply going to grab the message ID and then we're going to loop through all of the nodes which in our list of messages. We're going to get the attribute message, data message, which is going to be the ID of the message, and we're going to compare it. If we find a node that matches this, we're simply going to remove it. Same thing for delete message. And yeah, that's about it really. Removing like index, because we're no longer using index, we're simply going to use the message. And chat list item has no key anymore, but it's just message. And if we look at chat list item, this is now hopefully going to make a lot of sense. Instead of using explicitly passing in a key of some sort, which used to be the index, now we're simply going to use the message ID instead. And into the chat menu component, we pass in the message ID directly because it doesn't need to have a knowledge of the entire message object. And the same thing goes for down here, message ID instead of key. And chat menu is now simply going to, instead of getting a property called key, it's just going to get the property message ID, and it's going to pass that into these functions as we saw earlier. And edit text does pretty much the same thing. It's just going to take in the message ID and put it into the function. Message menu does the same thing, just passing in the message ID to all of the functions, so that we don't have a reference to the index, or because we want it just to be the message ID in of itself. And then we can look at the boilerplate, which is just going to be these actions here, new actions and new events, and we've already looked at the reducer and stuff of this nature. Cool, so I think that about covers it. That is us done with being able to remove a message that we've already created, so we can put that in ready for test. And next up is going to be to create a thread, so let's have a look at that.